So I was very curious to hear your enlightenment story. What happened to you? How you managed to make this breakthrough? Yeah, please tell us how this happened.
Um, I guess I'll do the longer version. Huh. No, I mean, I've since I was young, always had kind of an interest in unusual topics. So I always had a sense there was more to reality than what was seen. So it always kind of led me to seeking on some level. But it wasn't until my teens when I got into spirituality, and that kind of started a long, I guess, seeking path where I was reading everything I could find and learning stuff from a whole bunch of different people, and did that for about 13 years. Had funny enough, never studied non-duality. Never studied I mean, I seen the terms awakening and enlightenment, but there were so many conflicting definitions and stuff, I kind of doubted it existed. But after about 13 years, I kind of got this point where every new book seemed to be something I'd already read before, and I just kind of was hit with this futility of it, and so I gave up the search, and totally quit. And then about a year and a half later, um, about 2005, E- Eckhart Tolle's name kept popping up, and I've been in spirituality long enough to know about synchronicities and things like that. So with his name repeatedly popping up like 3 or 4 times in the same week, I'm like, okay, I should probably look into it. But I loathed the idea of reading another book. And so I went to the library and tried to see if there was a video, and sure enough, they had one video by Eckhart Tolle. So I watched that. Much of it was stuff I'd seen and heard before. He talked about being present primarily. I thought I was being present. Funny enough, that was the issue. Is I thought I was being present, and uh, and so during the course of the video, he was going through inhabiting the body, and that's when I became really present again. Now, to clarify, that isn't the first time I was ever present. I mean, we all experience deep presence spontaneously or through meditation quite a bit all the time. I mean, I remember when I was in Machu Picchu when I was much younger. Just the sight of it just threw me in awe. I mean, there wasn't a thought going through my head for 15 minutes. It was just deep presence. So this was not the first time I was present, but I guess, as you could say, the fruit was ripe at that point, and in that deep presence, things just kind of clicked, and awakening happened. Um, at the time, wasn't exactly sure what happened. Didn't have the terminology or anything for it. I knew something happened. I couldn't quite tell what happened. It's just everything kind of made sense, and there was a non-dual realization. So it was kind of a I understood non-duality at that point, even though I hadn't studied it. And in the video, he did mention Ramana Maharshi. So then I went over and I read a book by Ramana Maharshi. Was blown away by Ramana's very laser focused message. That's why he's still one of my favorite teachers, because he just won't let you wiggle away from the basic question, "Who am I?" Um, but as I was reading Ramana Maharshi, which also then led me to Nisargadatta Maharaj, H. Punja, Gangaji, kind of the entire line from that time to present. Ramesh Balsekar, several. I think I read probably eight, maybe a dozen different non-duality teachers. Adyashanti on the more Zen side, along with Advaita, and that kind of got me the nomenclature and the terminology. And so, as I'm reading these books, I'm kind of like, when they're describing what awakening is, I'm like, "Yep, that's what happened to me." And so that's when I kind of realized it was awakening and enlightenment that happened. Because, like I said, I mean, when my spiritual journey, I had seen the definition and term thrown out so much that I wasn't even sure it existed. So until I was reading these books and they were describing, well, this is what enlightenment really is, I kind of went, oh, that's what happened. And so now that's why I use that term, because it's the same term they were using. Um, and after reading for, I don't know, 6 months, maybe a year, I kind of quit reading about that. I had absorbed enough nomenclature and terminology to be able to talk about it then.
Hmm.
And that's kind of been the awakening story.
Do you think there's some past karma that led you to this, or why can't other people go through the same experience?
Um, well, the thing is the issue is it's non-causal. I mean, it's kind of like trying to fall asleep at night. We don't will ourselves falling asleep. We can't deliberately try to fall asleep. The more we try to fall asleep, we keep ourselves up. We just can't fall asleep. And I find awakening is very much the same kind of animal in that it happens of itself. You could say it's karma, you could say it's grace, and you can give it various terms, but the fact of the matter is it's just non-causal. Um, but there are things that you can do, much like when you're trying to fall asleep, there are things you can do that make awakening more conducive. And so, just like when we want to go to sleep, we go to a dark and quiet room. Well, why do we do that? Because it's easier to fall asleep in a dark and quiet room. Is a dark and quiet room causal? Will it cause sleep? No, any insomniac will tell you that. And if you go to a dark and quiet room with no intention of falling asleep, you won't. Is a dark and quiet room required? No, you could be sitting in a lawn chair in the sun and fall asleep. So a dark and quiet room isn't even required.
Hmm.
So it's very much a non-causal thing. But you can't deny that a dark and quiet room doesn't make it more conducive because that's why we do it. And so I find when it comes to awakening enlightenment, there's nothing that will cause it. And that's the problem is a lot of times we're trying to cause it. And so it's like trying to cause yourself to fall asleep. We end up getting in our own way. To a certain extent, we got to kind of relax a bit more into it and let it happen to us as opposed to trying to cause it. And there are just various things we can do to make awakening more conducive. And that's things like being still, silent, fully aware. You can call it being present, meditation, mindfulness. They're all kind of related. Um,
Understood.
and then that's probably the best thing you can do. And I love how Ramana just called it abiding in silence. When people ask him, "What do you do?" Abide in silence. That's what you do. But then for the very active minds, he would teach self inquiry. And he even said the purpose of self inquiry is to quiet the mind so you can abide in silence. So, it's one of those things where abiding in silence, being very present, mindful, whatever term you want, I just say being still, silent, fully aware, not thinking. That is very, very conducive. Um, Now, for someone who's still running through the ego game, it's inevitable that at some point, as they're not doing this, or however you want to phrase it, but they're just being still silent, fully aware, there's inevitably going to be a point where they're going, I've been doing a whole lot of nothing, but I really feel I must do something. I don't know how many times I hear that. I got to do something. I feel I must do something. And so in those situations, I say really the only thing you can do is look at this me that you feel and think yourself to be and really look at it. Are you really that? And if you look at it deeply enough and long enough, because again, funny enough, seeing is kind of a grace. We can look, but that does not guarantee seeing. The longer you look, the more likely you'll see. But I mean, you could go to your fridge, like if I'm looking for the ketchup and I'll ask my wife, where is it? And she goes, oh, it's in the fridge door. I can go to the fridge and open up the door and scan the shelves. And I don't see it. She'll walk over and pull it right out. It was there the entire time. I just didn't see it. And so we can look, but seeing is also kind of a grace. And so as you're looking at this me, you may or may not see that you're not that. But if you deeply see you're not that, well, that's starting to cut away the attachment and illusion of a me. And that destabilizing of the me, I think also makes it more conducive to wake up because someone who has a very, very firm me, I know exactly who I am. Um, it's very hard for them to realize what they really are because they're so fixated on what they're not,
Hmm.
identifying with it. And so I usually go, well, if you must do something, look at this thing you're identifying with and see that you're not that. And other than that, just be still, silent, fully aware. But that's kind of been my advice. I know there's a lot of other people that try different practices, but I kind of do the minimalist approach going, these are the two things. Just do that.
So is that your favorite technique to instruct to students? Is I am not that? Would that? Is that your favorite enlightenment technique?
That's the technique to kind of loosen up the me. Um, it's but that nitty nitty, the I'm not this, not that approach. It's more than a mental thing. That's the one thing I noticed about a lot of, say, classical Advaita and stuff. When they talk about nitty and nitty, it's almost a mental thing. They're just like, oh yeah, I know I'm not that. No, it's more visceral than that. You really gotta see and feel in your bones you're not that. It's so that way it never causes a confusion in the future. If you identify with the body, let's say, I talked with a guy once. He was funny. Um, he goes, "No, I really feel I am the body," and I'm like, "Okay, well, let's go with that. Are you all the body, or are you some of the body?" "No, no, I'm all the body," he replies, and I said, "Okay, well, let's investigate that a bit. When you get a haircut or clip your nails, have you lost something of yourself? Do you feel diminished?" And he's like, "No, I'm still me." And I'm like, "Well, then you're not your nails or hair." I go, "Have you ever had appendicitis or tonsillitis? Have you lost your tonsils or appendix?" And it's like, "Yeah, oh, yeah. Are you diminished?" "No, I'm still me." I'm like, "Well, you're not those organs." You just start chiseling away. But it's also not a mental thing. I mean, they really got to feel it. It's like, oh yes, I feel that the lack of tonsils has not diminished the me. I'm not the me. Sorry, the feeling of existence of being, that's not diminished by the lack of tonsils or appendix or hair or nails or whatever. And so it becomes almost a visceral experience where you can even go, yeah, you start kind of going through the, if I was in an accident and I lost my arm, and you just kind of almost like experientially try to feel through it. If I had no arm, would I be diminished? Oh yeah, I'd have a physical handicap, but I'd still be, my full being would still be there, even without an arm. And so, and in that way, it becomes an experiential, visceral exercise. I find that's really the secret with most spiritual exercises is we've turned them into mental games and exercises, which are not very effective. The mind is way too fickle. And so when it's more visceral and experiential, it tends to have a lot more impact. But the neti neti in as a experiential visceral exercise, I think is very good.
How do you go about instructing students? You gave me one technique or example. How does one become enlightened in the first place? What has to be done?
Well, I usually stop them there and I go, there's nothing you can do. It's not a causal. No matter what you do, you're not going to cause it. Again, it's just creating a more conducive environment.
Mm.
And so usually I just say there's only two things that you can do. It's be still, silent, fully aware, not thinking. And when you just can't take that anymore, look at this me you feel and think yourself to be and look at it deeply enough till you see you're not that. And beyond that, it potentially falls into possible distraction because that's the problem with a lot of spiritual exercises. It's all about getting somewhere. I need to get there. I need to, and we're so often focused on somewhere else. And if enlightenment is anything, it's a total rectification or really being with what is here and now. It doesn't involve getting anywhere. It's here. You're only going to find it here. And so I try to minimize, if anything, I try to not allow a whole lot of seeking. So when people are like, well, how do I get there? And that whole seeking paradigm, I'm like, you can't seek it. You can't cause it. You know, you can create a more conducive environment, do these things to create a conducive environment, and just let it happen or not happen. you know, it's going to happen or not happen on its own. Um, because if you suddenly, and then you don't want to let the ego co-opt or hijack any of this stuff. Because if you start, say, meditating, I don't know how many meditators I've seen do this. They'll sit down and they'll meditate, and they'll have these experiences or profound meditations or whatever. And then they start going, I'm making all this progress. And it's like the ego kind of hijacks it. And it's like, look, I've gotten all this progress. I put in all this time. I'm a good spiritual person because I do all this effort. And I'm like, you're now working against yourself. You're now building the me. You're not dismantling the me. I
Yeah.
try to keep it very, 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 very focused to you're dismantling the me or just being silent. That's really all you're doing.
Mm. How does the Buddha's teachings relate to what you're teaching and what you practice?
Mm, You know, the Buddha's teaching, a lot of it, funny enough, came down to also the direct knowing experientially. It's like he often pointed to the fact that we make ourselves miserable um, subconsciously. We're they're like automatic. And so much of Vipassana and other techniques in Buddhism is all about just really seeing what you're doing and kind of, oh, this is what I'm doing and how I'm doing it to myself. Because once you can see what you're doing to yourself, you've got the chance to stop doing it. But I mean, it's one of those things where the I'm not like a Buddha's teaching expert, but I mean, a lot of the stuff they talked about, I really liked. Um, and I really like old Chinese Zen Buddhism in particular because they were very, very specific about awakening being a sudden and complete, where it's like, the whole idea of a progress is just a way to keep a fictitious me going. Only a fictitious me can make the progress. And so we're very, very much about it's a sudden complete, oh, I get it now. And I think it very much is like that. So I mean old Chinese Zen Buddhism, kind of the Buddhist teachings. I mean, some of the stuff that some of the metaphors and stuff they talk about, like the empty boat, very insightful. Do you know the empty boat?
It sounds familiar, but no, maybe you can refresh it.
You probably heard it before, but I mean, a boatman is crossing the river. He's rowing away, and he feels a boat hit in front, and he turns. This anger arises, and he turns to you know to shout out the guy who bumped into him. He turns and he sees it's an empty boat that was drift. And as soon as he sees it's empty, it's like all the anger just gone. Because there's no one to assign blame to now. So the whole reason for the anger to arise is no longer there, and so it collapsed.
Mm.
And the whole idea, the kind of the moral that the Buddhists slide in there, the moral of the story is why can't it always be an empty boat, even if someone was sitting in there? you know, because a lot of times it was a simple accident. It's not like they're going out of their way to go, I'm going to ram this boat. It was like something happened. He bumped into the boat. It's an empty boat, same as if it was adrift. No big deal.
Mm.
And so, they have these little stories and metaphors to get you to think about things differently, kind of turn the viewpoint a bit. But I mean, the fundamentals of Buddhism, I really like because in the Noble Eightfold Path, I mean, really, the whole seed is in the first one. Um, Samadhi, right view. That's the way it's usually translated. But right is sama, same root as sum. Could mean complete, total. Um, and then dithi is view, but also could be understanding. So I mean, another way to look at samadhi is a complete understanding or a complete worldview. And and so they say, all of Buddhism boils down to wrong view. That's why all this suffering comes up. You have the wrong view. If you had the complete understanding, if you did not have this ignorance, you would not be suffering. And so fundamentally, it's all about seeing what it really is. And that's kind of what Buddhism is in a nutshell. And so they have all these aphorisms and metaphors and stuff to try to shift your view to maybe let you catch the right view. It's an empty boat. You don't need to get ticked off about
Mm.
it. And so, they're always shooting for a way to shake up your paradigm so that way you might see right view, especially the crazy Zen guys, where the crazy Zen masters, where they use crazy wisdom to try to knock you off balance. But but there's different ways of trying to, in a way, Buddhism is spiritual ophthalmology. It's just it's spiritual correcting worldview. That's really all it is. Is you're just trying to go, okay, with the right view, you would not be suffering. With right view, you would not be having these issues, making yourself miserable. Um, Try to see what is as it is. Because because the mind only lets you see what it will let you see. I mean, based on our current understanding and frame of mind. There's a Buddhist story. I think this was not long after Buddha awakened. He was traveling with his first couple of disciples. They come upon this view, and where there's a cliff, and this guy is running up to basically throw himself off the cliff. And the other two monks kind of restrain him. They're trying to hold him back, and the guy's like, "I'm gonna kill myself. You get out of my way." And after he calms down a little bit, the Buddha's like, "What's the problem?" And the guy's like, "My wife left me. The world is crap. This is going on. It's horrible. I'm just gonna kill myself." And he just kind of talked with him for a while, and the guy kind of slowly calmed down a bit. And I guess at a point when he settled down, he just kind of goes, "Turn around and look." And where they were happened to be located was a rather pristine view. It's like you look and it's just awe. And the guy kind of looks and just, wow, the place is awesome. He's kind of uplifted by it. And the Buddha just posed a simple question. He goes, "Why didn't you notice this when you first got here?" It's just your current understanding, your current frame of mind would not let you see what is there for everybody to see. And so a lot of Buddhism is about just trying to see what is and get past those little barriers. And a lot of non-duality is the same way. Um, Another story I like is out of Meetings with Remarkable Men by Gurdjieff. Early in the book, there's a story when he was a boy, and he was traveling through this village, and he sees all these village children around this circle. And there's a boy in the middle, and they're trying to shove him out, and the boy in the circle is just freaking out. And they're trying to, they're throwing sticks at him, and they're pulling him and shoving him, and they're trying to get him out of the circle, and the kid's just freaking out. And Gurdjieff goes, "Well, what's going on?" And they go, "Well, that boy's a Yazidi boy, and the Yazidi have the belief system of they cannot cross that circle. I forget for what reason, but basically, the Yazidi are known that if they actually were forced out, they'd practically go catatonic for a while. Their body just shuts down. But their belief structure was such and so strong, it's like they could not cross that circle." And Gurdjieff kind of looked at that. And he saw it was rather profound because he goes, "There's nothing stopping the kid from walking outside that circle. It's all in his head." And that's fundamentally what we do to ourselves. We pin ourselves in, and the bounds, the barriers, the bondage we feel, it's all in our head. We put it on ourselves. And so in the Buddhist point of view, it's trying to have right view and seeing you were never trapped in the first place.
Mm.
The bondage was imagined from the beginning. And so, and that's very, very difficult to realize if you're trying to get somewhere else. I think that's why the being still, silent, fully aware is very important, because if you're not thinking, so that's a moment of far less distraction because of thoughts arising. So you're just still, silent, fully aware. As you're just kind of fully aware, you might notice experientially. There's not a real feeling of maybe there's not a feeling of an edge. Like, there's not a defined barrier. Be it consciousness, being, existence. I don't know. There's different ways you can play with it, but you might feel that normally defined me and other. You might be looking at a flower or a tree and go, it almost feels like I'm breathing with the tree. You know, the division isn't there like it normally is. It might get you to start wondering, is that division really real, or am I just making it up?
Mm.
And so it's those moments of being quiet and just looking. We might see what is as it is, which is why I think one of the interesting ways of enlightenment being defined. I can't remember who defined it this way, but they just said, I think it was Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. I defined it as seeing what is as it really is. That's just what enlightenment is: seeing what is as it really is.
Mm.
I think that's rather profound because that just means most of the time we're seeing reality for what it's not. And that's what's causing all the problems.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I want to ask if you've been to India. Done any
Not
pilgrim?
yet. I was going to do a trip to India. Uh, then I bought my first house instead.
It's not a bad
um,
trade-off.
yeah, well, it's like, well, I've got this money. I can do a down payment on a house, or I can go to India. Oh well, but no, I'd like to go to India someday. Um, it's a long trip, and so if I go, I'd probably want to go at least a month. Because there's just so much I want to see, and I mean, I would only get to scratch the surface even in a month. But no, I'd love to go there. I haven't had a chance yet though.
Where would you like to go? What places would you visit?
Mostly the Uttar Pradesh, the Himalayan foothills. So it's like north of Delhi, kind of Hardwar, Rishikesh, go down to uh, Varanasi, the old Benares.
Mm.
Um, you know, there's several sites in that region that are just generally holy places, but also sites for not only Buddhism but Shivaism, and there's just so many interesting places there. And so and there's also the touristy Taj Mahal's in the center there, so do that as well.
Yes, yes, yes.
Go to Agra, go to Benares, kind of come around. Kind of a loop I was thinking.
Mm.
Come into Delhi, go around, come back to Delhi. That actually is a much longer trip than you would think. I looked at it by train. It was like several days to get point A to point B.
Mm. Yeah.
So
Well, I hope you do go at one point, hopefully sometime soon.
yeah, well, the thing is that would be a long trip, and if I was going to do a short trip, I'd probably like to go to Ramana Maharshi's ashram, go around Arunachala. That'd be a fun trip too.
Mm.
But that would have to be a different time of year because that's southern India and it's hot.
Yes, 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 yes. If you do go to South India, try to make it to Isha Yoga Center,
Okay.
sadhgurus. There's a mountain there that Shiva stayed for some time, 3.5 months.
Yep.
So it's very profound. But yeah,
Excellent.
these are all the questions that I have for you today. Eric, thank you so much for
Oh
joining me here.
yeah, yeah. It was fun.
And yeah, let me know if you have any closing words, where people can find you. Let us know.
Yeah. I mean, kind of my repositories at non-dualitysimplified.com. That's got my old blog that I used to write back in the day, all my old audio podcasts in the back in the day. Got a link to the YouTube channel, other articles, cartoons, things I've done over the years. It's kind of my online repository, so you can check out all things me there, I guess.
Yes. I will link your YouTube channel in the description. And yeah, thank you so much.
Great.
Goodbye.
Thank you much.